Welcome back to America's Forum. I'm J.D. Hayworth. We turn our attention now to Saudi Arabia, where 62 suspected al-Qaeda militants have been detained. Saudi Arabia says the detainees have links to radicals in Syria and Yemen. Saudi Arabia's Interior Ministry says the group was plotting attacks on government and foreign targets. This group is the largest in 2 years to have been detained in Saudi Arabia on suspicion of ties to radicals. A spokesman says 35 of the suspects have previously been held by Saudi authorities on security charges before being released. Joining us now for our daily intelligence brief, my former colleague from the House of Representatives, Pete Hoekstra, who served as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Pete, we welcome you back to America's Forum. What do you make of this report from the Saudis? Is it reliable?
Oh, I think it's reliable. There's no reason for them to not be reliable, especially in this area. This is one area where there's very close cooperation between the U.S. and the Saudis in terms of keeping the Arabian Peninsula secure and keeping this monarchy in power in Saudi. What I take out of this is, Yemen is still a breeding ground for terrorists. And what we know about al-Qaeda on the Arabian Peninsula, al-Qaeda in Yemen, is this is a group that's very interested in exporting terrorism, whether it's to Saudi or whether it's like the underwear bomber, that plot targeted Detroit, targeted the United States. Yemen's a big area of concern.
Well, Pete, and we talked about this the other day, the paradox of our relationship with Saudi Arabia, because on one hand, the kingdom has served as an ally. On the other hand, a whole lot of petrodollars end up in the hands of jihadists, or at least people with suspected of that kind of outlook. So with that in mind, I believe you described it the other day as the tightrope that we have to walk with Saudi Arabia in terms of intelligence, in terms of our relationship with them. It is something that remains a real concern, but I would guess this development would put the Saudis more on the ally side than the adversary right now.
Oh, absolutely. This is an area where they want as much U.S. help as we can get. They now start to see that, by exporting this radical jihadist movement, for years they believed, if we're exporting it, if we're funding it overseas, if we're supporting it in Pakistan, if we're supporting radical mosques in the United States or whatever, that will placate those groups and they'll leave us alone at home. And now, once again, they're finding actually what you're doing is you're creating perhaps an enemy outside of Saudi, but ultimately, these things will be visited on Saudi Arabia. They will want to overthrow the Saudi government, and that's what they're worried about. Hopefully what they'll stop doing is funding these radical jihadist mosques around the world.
And Pete, just the other day we got together, we were talking about Africa and what was happening there, and you brought up the situation in Nigeria. Now Nigeria says it will accept U.S. help to rescue all those young girls captured by the terrorist group Boko Haram. Pete, a couple of things. As the terrorist group continues to kidnap young girls, we had the president come out yesterday and announce this with great fanfare. In announcing this, does that paradoxically take away the threat of U.S. action? I mean, because it would seem to me if we were serious about mounting an operation, we would point out the grave concerns we have, but not trumpet the fact that, we're sending FBI teams and maybe some troops to the general vicinity.
If you're going, and what you want in these kinds of situations, JD, and I think this is exactly what you're alluding to. If you want to go in and have a rescue attempt for these 200 young girls now who have been kidnapped, who are being potentially held for ransom, or may be sold off as sex slaves or who knows what, you would think we wouldn't be talking about it. We might not even be expressing any interest at all. But we'd be preparing to, get all the information so that we could launch an attack successfully. What's the most important ingredient? in launching a successful attack, a raid of this kind of scope? Surprise. And the president, announcing this, it's like, now, why would we be announcing and telling these folks that, we're willing to help, we're going to send resources in? We've just tipped them off. It makes for good press, it makes for good PR, it makes for bad policy, and it makes it harder for our intelligence folks or our special operations folks to actually go and do the job. You'll remember when we went after bin Laden, I was in London the day that it was announced that we had killed bin Laden. There was no information, not anything that's saying, hey, we're getting close, we're going to get them next week. It makes no sense at all.
So this announcement takes away the notion of surprise, or at the very least strategic ambiguity. Before we come back stateside with some of the dealings internally in our old workplace, the House of Representatives, let me talk about what is going on with President Putin and announcements today that, oh yes, the Russians are pulling back from the Ukraine. Is that just straight out deceit from Mr. Putin?
Probably. I mean, we found out, we covered this a couple of weeks ago when Kerry had the breakthrough agreement with Putin, or with his foreign minister, and we found that that agreement didn't go anywhere. Putin is a master, and they're playing this whole thing masterfully. He has someone in from the EU. He meets with them, tells them, hey, we're pulling our troops back. We're telling people not to hold the referendum. We're supporting the elections on May 25 in Ukraine. Everything that the West, everything that the EU, and everything that America wants to hear, and then none of it materializes. And I think the reports also this morning indicate that although he said he's moved his troops back and put them back in the bases and those kinds of things, American intelligence and American military have seen no movement that would confirm that. They're basically saying the troops are still exactly where they were and where they've been for the last couple of weeks. So Putin says one thing and does another. That doesn't surprise me, and it shouldn't surprise anybody in our foreign policy shop.
Now, as promised, back to our old workplace, the United States House of Representatives, Congressman Trey Gowdy, officially named to head a special select committee investigating Benghazi, and Capitol Police are now investigating threatening emails saying that Representative Gowdy would be harmed. These threats come as Nancy Pelosi and Democrat Whip Steny Hoyer slammed the committee. In a letter they sent to Speaker John Boehner, they wrote, and I quote, "If you truly want this new select committee to be bipartisan and fair and to be taken seriously by the American people, we called on you to reconsider this approach before bringing this measure to the House floor for a vote." So, Pete, we've heard from the top Democrat leaders that suddenly things should be even-steven on this committee. What is your take on this?
Oh, that's absolutely ludicrous. They've put together special committees and those kinds of things. That's not how the House works. The majority party should have the majority of the members on the committee. Actually, I think what the Speaker has proposed and what's in the resolution, I think that's going to come to the floor probably tomorrow. 7 Republicans, 5 Democrats. That's very, very generous to the minority. I can tell you, I know Steny Hoyer, Nancy Pelosi, so do you. If they were doing an investigation of, George Bush or something like that, they wouldn't make it 6 and 6. It's all about a political posturing. 7 to 5 is a very, very appropriate proportional representation for this committee. The Democrats will participate in this process. They have to participate. The emails to Trey Gowdy, those are of concern. The Capitol Hill Police will take them very, very seriously, which they should. But it's now time for this committee to be formed for Republicans and Democrats to all get to work and get the work done.
Pete, about a minute left. Before we go, what about Trey's assertion that he wants to take a look at every single page of every relevant document? I know he's a thorough and aggressive prosecutor, but they're 8 months to get the work of this committee done?
Really, there's 5 months to get this done. They've got to get it done before the election. they're going to have to prioritize it, what they look at, what topics they cover, and they've got to be prepared to work 6 days a week. They're not going to take an August recess. They're not going to take time off before the elections. The Speaker ought to make it clear to every person that he assigns to that committee that between now and November, between now and the end of the year, they will be working weekends and they will not be going home to their districts. They got to get this done.
Time is of the essence. Time also a concern here. Our time is up. As always, Pete Hoekstra, we thank you for your insights and analysis in our daily intelligence brief. Now, stay with us. When we come back, the largest e-company in the world, e-commerce company, is about to go public. We'll tell you which country it wants to call home. That's straight ahead on America's Forum.